Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome our second panel and thank you in advance for your testimony. It is the custom of this committee to ask witnesses to be sworn who are to provide testimony before it. So could I ask you all to rise and raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give to this subcommittee is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do. Let the record show that all of the witnesses have answered in the affirmative. In the interest of time, what I'd like to do is just to offer a brief introduction of each of the witnesses, and then we'll go back and allow the witnesses to provide an opening statement. Council Member Jim Graham became chairman of the Metro Board in January of 1999. Mr. Graham currently serves on the Council of the District of Columbia, representing Ward 1. He also chairs the Council's Committee on Public Works and Transportation. Mr. Graham served as Executive Director of the Whitman Walker Clinic from 1984 to 1998. Previously, Mr. Graham served as Staff Counsel for Senator Abe Ribicoff, Democrat from Connecticut, and Clerk to Chief Justice Earl Warren, now retired. Mr. John B. Cato has more than 30 years of experience in public transportation. As General Manager of the Washington Metropolitan Area Transit Authority, he oversees the second largest rail transit system and the fifth largest bus network in the United States, with more than 10,000 employees, a $1.3 billion operating budget, and a $3.1 billion 5-year capital improvements program. Mr. Deborah A.P. Hersman was sworn in as the 35th member of the National Transportation Safety Board on June 21, 2004. Since her appointment to the board, Ms. Hersman has been the member on scene at 15 major transportation accidents. Before joining the NTSB, Ms. Hersman was a senior professional staff member of the U.S. Senate Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation from 1999 to 2004. Mr. Eric Madison joined the Mass Transit Administration as Transportation Planner in 2007. Mr. Madison was appointed as a district representative to the Tri-State Oversight Committee for State Safety Oversight of the Washington Metropolitan Area Transit Authority, Metrorail system, and in April 2007 became chair of the committee. Mr. Madison began his career with the District Department of Transportation in 2003 as an administrative management officer for the Public Space Management Administration. Mr. Peter M. Rogoff was confirmed by the United States Senate as Administrator of the Federal Transit Administration in May of 2009. Prior to joining the Federal Transit Authority, Mr. Rogoff served on the staff of the Senate Appropriations Committee for 22 years, including 14 years as the Democratic Staff Director of the Transportation Subcommittee. Mr. Rogoff has a strong background in federal infrastructure, budgeting, and finance, and has played an active role in the financing of the last 3 comprehensive surface transportation reauthorization bills. I would now like to recognize Mr. Graham for 5 minutes for an opening statement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member Chavez, Delegate Norton, Congressman Connolly, and Congressman Van Hollen. I am here today in my capacity as Chairman of the WMATA Board. June 22, 2009 was and will always be a date of great tragedy for our agency and for all who rely on it. Those most directly impacted remain in our hearts and prayers and motivate our every action. I want to especially thank Mr. Tewitt for coming here today to share his personal experience, which I found very impactful. As a first step, our board did act within 24 hours to authorize the General Manager to provide emergency hardship relief funds to those who were victims of this tragedy. That relief was not contingent on anything, and it was made clear that it had no ramifications of a legal nature insofar as ultimate liability. It was rather a humanitarian gesture to relieve immediate hardship, and I know firsthand from working with certain of these families that it was really very much appreciated. On behalf of our Board of Directors, I want to say that we believe in our management and we have confidence in the skill and dedication of our General Manager, John Cato. We believe our system is safe, and we will do all we can to ensure that once the probable cause or causes of the accident are identified, action will be taken by the authority to remedy and address those problems. Please keep in mind that in all of our history, there has been but one other fatality involving passengers, and that was more than 25 years ago. But for pressing infrastructure needs, we need real action by the Congress to make good on the promise in last year's Authorization Act and thereby provide a full payment of $150 million in FY10 federal appropriations. Presently, our local jurisdictions carry nearly the entire burden. For example, D.C. taxpayers will send some $300 million to WMATA in FY10. We are very encouraged, Mr. Chairman, by the action that was taken yesterday by the House Appropriations Subcommittee on Transportation to take that first and extraordinarily important step in appropriating $150 million for FY10. I want to commend everyone that was involved in this, most particularly our regional delegation. Some of the members are here today, Delegate Norton, Congressman Connolly, Congressman Van Hollen, and others. And I also want to single out our majority leader, Mr. Hoyer, for his fine role in all of this. I believe that if Congress acts to finalize the $150 million for FY10, that D.C., Maryland, and the Commonwealth of Virginia will all find the matching funds to bring together $300 million annually for each of the next 10 years. This money will make a critical difference in our abilities. Mr. Chairman, I remember our last hearing where you were so diligent in terms of making sure that we had put everything out of the path in terms of obstacles in order to make sure that this money would become available. But, Mr. Chairman, we also need to have the active commitment of President Barack Obama and his administration to find emergency stimulus dollars for immediate assistance with these infrastructure issues. I noted that Congressman Davis made a particular point of this in his comments today. Finally, we appreciate the support of our local congressional delegation, as I have said, in its continued work to move all of this forward. Thank you.
Thank the gentleman. Mr. Cato, you're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and also Ranking Member Chavitz. I'm happy to be here today to testify in front of you in the position of General Manager of the Washington Metropolitan Area Transit Authority, commonly known as WMATA or Metro. The basic facts of what happened on June 22nd are really described in my written testimony, as well as the testimony from the National Transportation Safety Board. And through this questioning this afternoon, I'm sure we will cover every aspect of that. I do want to say that we are working with the National Transportation Safety Board to provide support in their investigation, and they have the lead responsibility for the investigation of this accident. Today I will focus on the steps that Metro has taken since the accident to ensure the safety of our riders and employees, and also touch on the capital needs of this organization. First, I would like to extend my sympathy and those of all Metro employees to the families of those who died in this accident. I, as well as all Metro employees, are saddened by this event, but my grief is only small compared to the grief of the families of those who lost their lives. Our thoughts are also with those who are injured, and we pray for their speedy recovery. This is a difficult time for them and their loved ones, and we would do whatever we can to help them come through this process. I would also like to take a moment to acknowledge and thank the first responders from the District of Columbia, as well as from other local fire departments, police departments, as well as members of the Metro Transit Police and our employees who responded to this accident and provided assistance in a very quick, in my judgment, time period. My written testimony also includes the list of those who provided assistance, which I am truly, deeply grateful. Safety is at the foundation of what we do at Metro. We have always taken our responsibility to safety seriously, and we have always taken a number of steps to ensure that this system is as safe as possible. First, upon notice of this accident, we began to operate all of our trains in manual mode rather than automated mode to ensure, again, the integrity of the system. Second, within days of discovering that a track circuit in the area of the accident had lost its ability from time to time to detect trains, we physically inspected each of the 3,000 track circuits in our rail system. And we are also running daily computerized tests on those circuits. Third, we have arranged for an independent review of our automated train control system after working with the National Transportation Safety Board. This review will be conducted by a group of outside transit signal experts, and I appreciate the assistance provided by the American Public Transportation Association for assistance in this effort. Finally, while they are safe to operate, I decided to place our oldest rail cars in the center of trains. We plan to replace those cars as soon as funding is available and funding is secured. As you may be aware, yesterday the National Transportation Safety Board recommended that Metro enhance redundancy in our train control system by using real-time data and automatic alerts. We have already begun contacting vendors with experts or expertise in this area, and we are preparing an estimate of the cost to develop and implement the automated system. When we are able to determine the steps necessary, we will move forward with this system. We will do what we have to ensure that this system is put into place. However, it requires a specialized development for the WMATA system. But we would dedicate the necessary resources to implement this recommendation as soon as that system is ready. This meeting and this process will not begin next week. It has already begun. And in fact, a meeting is scheduled tomorrow morning with the vendors within WMATA to begin the process of moving forward to meet the recommendations by the National Transportation Safety Board. We also recognize, and I realize, that this is an inconvenience to many of our customers of operating our system the way we're doing so today. We have not been able to return to pre-accident levels of service, and we will not be able to do so until this investigation is completed. Finally, I'd like to thank the Subcommittee on Appropriations for including the $150 million in funding for Metro's capital needs. Our capital needs over the next 10 years total $4 billion. And what I'm asking that this committee and the Congress do is to pass the compact amendments necessary to make the changes in our compact and to also appropriate the $150 million and pass it through the House so we can receive those funds for needed capital improvements. Thank you.
I thank the gentleman. Ms. Hersman, you're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you for the invitation to appear before the committee, Mr. Lynch, Mr. Chaffetz, and members of the regional delegation. Ms. Norton has been a long supporter of the NTSB's investigations, and Mr. Van Hollen and Mr. Connolly, who's my representative, have been very engaged on this accident investigation. Since 1982, the NTSB has investigated 7 accidents on WMATA's property, resulting in 76 recommendations on a variety of issues. I am here today to brief you on the accident that occurred on June 22nd, involving 2 Red Line trains traveling inbound near the Fort Totten station. There were 9 fatalities and scores of injuries transported to local area hospitals. On behalf of the board, I would like to extend our thoughts and prayers to those who lost loved ones and those who remain in recovery from this accident. We launched our team within hours of the collision, Parties to our investigation involve many of the people that you see at this table: WMATA, FTA, Amalgamated TransUnion that was at the table before, and the Tri-State Oversight Committee. We were also assisted, as is customary in our accident investigations, by the FBI's evidence response team, documenting evidence on scene, as well as in the early stages of the investigation by many local responders from the area who did a great job assisting us. Let me begin by reviewing some factual information about our investigation. The standing train, Train 214, was a 6-car train consisting of 4 3000 series cars and 2 5000 series cars placed at the rear of that train. It had stopped before entering the Fort Totten station. It was following a train that was servicing the platform at Fort Totten. The striking train, Train 112, was a 6-car train composed of 6 1000 series cars, and it was following Train 214. As you heard from the eyewitness to the accident, when we interviewed passengers after the accident, they told us that there was an announcement that came on board that there was a train stopped ahead of them. They slowed or stopped, and then they began accelerating, and then the collision occurred. There was no communication between the train operators and Metro's Operations Control Center prior to the collision. Metro's rail cars are approximately 75 feet long. That lead car of the striking train telescoped into this last car of the standing train. Approximately 50 feet of that car's survivable space, or 2/3 of that car's survivable space, was compromised in the collision. Our investigators found metal-to-metal compression marks consistent with heavy braking on both rails of the track for about 125 feet, about 425 feet before the point of impact. Trains operate under the direction of WMATA's Operations Control Center, or OCC. They utilize an automatic train control system that's supplemented by wayside signals at interlockings. The system is designed to prevent collisions, regardless of whether or not trains are operating in the manual or the automatic mode. Speed commands for individual train movements should not allow for more than one train to occupy a track circuit at a time, and the maximum authorized speed for this section of track was 59 miles per hour. Post-accident testing shows that the track circuit at the accident site intermittently failed to detect a train that was at that location. On the day of the accident, the system did not detect the stop train, and the following train did not receive speed commands to slow or to stop prior to the collision. WMATA's maintenance records showed that on June 17th, 5 days before the accident, that an impedance bond pictured in the slideshow was replaced in the track circuit as part of a multi-year program for scheduled maintenance. Investigators are continuing to examine the train control system circuitry and recorded data to better understand how the train control system functioned prior to the accident. In addition, we will be conducting, with the assistance of WMATA, some sight distance tests on that stretch of track between Tacoma and Fort Totten this weekend. The Operations Control Center computer system receives real-time train location data. It displays this information on a monitor in the control center. After a post-accident review of the circuit data, WMATA reported that the track circuit intermittently lost its ability to detect a train after June 17th. WMATA has now assigned personnel to review recorded data once a day to identify anomalies system-wide. They do not have an automatic monitoring system that would identify and promptly report a situation in which a train stops being detected by the system. That is why we issued 2 urgent safety recommendations yesterday, one to WMATA and one to FTA. The recommendation to WMATA asks that it enhance the safety redundancy of its train control system that monitors track circuit data so that it can detect any lost trains and immediately alert the control center so that they can stop or slow the trains. The safety recommendation to FDA urges it to alert other transit operators that have systems similar to Metro's to determine if their systems have adequate safety redundancies, and if they don't, to take corrective action. Thank you for inviting me here today. I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. Mr. Rogoff, you now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ranking Member Chaffetz and other members of the subcommittee, the Federal Transit Administration appreciates very much being called to testify on the overall safety posture of our nation's rail transit systems and the FTA's very limited role in overseeing rail transit safety. As we address this issue of transit safety, it is essential to remember that rail transit remains our safest form of surface transportation by far. The citizens of the Washington area are always far safer riding in a Metrorail car, any type of Metro car, than traveling on the highway. The Metrorail system has experienced 13 onboard crash-related fatalities during its 33-year history. While every one of those fatalities has been a tragedy, the fact is that automobile accidents on the roads of the Washington area claim the same number of fatalities every 2 weeks. Any proposal that could result in passengers getting in their cars versus riding Metro will immediately degrade safety. That said, the Obama administration believes that there are improvements and reforms that can and should be made to make our transit systems even safer. While it is not very widely known, right now our nation's rail transit systems operate under two very different federal safety regimes. Commuter rail systems like MARC and the VRE are subject to the Federal Railroad Administration's very extensive safety regulations. Those rail transit systems are governed by national mandatory safety standards, and they undergo on-site spot inspections and audits by federal inspectors. Those federal safety inspectors are empowered to dictate operating practices and assess fines for any deficiencies found. By contrast, rail transit systems like Washington Metro, the New York City Subway, the trolley operations on the T in Boston, and 45 other systems are subject to a very different federal safety regime. In the case of those rail transit systems, the states are expected to establish and implement a safety program. The role of the Federal Transit Administration is limited to setting minimum program requirements and ensuring that the states have a safety authority in place. In performing our safety oversight role, the FTA is prohibited as a matter of federal law from dictating safety practices or setting mandatory national standards. FTA does not have the authority to assess fines, set operating rules, or even mandate the level of technical expertise the state authorities must have. And unfortunately, the vast majority of these state agencies, including the Tri-State Authority that oversees Metro, are very thinly staffed. The distinction between these two safety systems was plainly apparent at the site of the recent Red Line crash. When I visited the crash site at the invitation of Member Hersman, I saw a chain-link fence that separated the Metro tracks from other tracks in the same corridor that served Amtrak, MARC, and CSX trains. Under our two separate safety systems, the federal inspector that periodically inspects the track serving Amtrak and MARC cannot inspect the track on the other side of the fence, the side serving Metro. As the new team has come on board with the Obama administration, we find this status quo to be unacceptable, and we expect to propose reforms. Secretary LaHood has established a multimodal departmental committee chaired by Deputy Secretary Porcari to identify alternative approaches to address what we consider a gap in transit safety oversight. The team will review the different safety authorities and inspection regimes we have at DOT with an eye toward proposing reforms to Congress soon. Now, on the matter of financing, it is impossible to discuss the issue of safety of our nation's transit systems without simultaneously discussing the financing of those systems. At the FTA, we find that the systems that are adequately financed are those with a dedicated funding source that provides a predictable revenue stream, and WMATA does not have such a system. WMATA does benefit from a regular stream of federal formula grants that totaled approximately $220 million in 2008. Also, WMATA operates in the only region in the United States where the federal government has mandated transit benefits for all federal employees. That generates an additional $170 million each year in farebox revenue for WMATA. In addition to these federal resources, the Secretary and I do support congressional efforts to make matching federal grants available to WMATA for 2010 while working within the overall spending ceiling established in the President's annual budget. We believe strongly, however, that these federal matching funds must be used by WMATA to address the most safety-critical issues in the system as identified by appropriate vulnerability assessments. I want to make clear that in calling for reform and endorsing additional funding for WMATA, I do not intend to leave the impression that the cause of the recent Red Line disaster was related to inadequate safety rules, inadequate safety oversight, inadequate funding, or poor compliance on the part of Metro. Only the NTSB investigation will reveal to us the true cause or causes of the accident, and we at the FTA stand ready to review and implement any recommendations that arise from the board's investigation, just as we did yesterday evening, while working within the very limited safety authorities we have under current law. Now, Mr. Chairman, my time is up. I hope I will have an opportunity later to respond to the concerns raised by Mr. Micah regarding our grant rules, and maybe we can do that in Q&A. And with that, I thank you for the opportunity to testify.
I thank the gentleman. Mr. Madison, you are now recognized for 5 minutes.
Distinguished members of the committee, good afternoon, and thank you for inviting me to discuss rail operations and safety at the Washington Metropolitan Area Transit Authority, or WMATA, and the tragic accident of June 22, 2009, as well as the activities of the Tri-State Oversight Committee, which we call the TOC. Before I begin, I would like to take this opportunity on behalf of the members of the TOC to express our heartfelt sympathies and condolences to the victims and the families of those who were affected by this tragic accident. We will continue to keep them in our thoughts and prayers. The members of the TOC are fully committed to working closely with WMATA, the Federal Transit Administration, the NTSB, and Congress to improve safety operations and prevent another similar accident from ever occurring again. My testimony will provide a brief overview of the State Safety Oversight Program in general as prescribed by 49 Code of Federal Regulations, Part 659, and the TOC's roles, responsibilities, and authority. I will also discuss the TOC's recent history and address the limitations faced by the TOC in performing safety oversight and regulation of WMATA. The TOC is the State Safety Oversight Agency, or SSO, responsible for overseeing Metro's rail safety program. Under 49 CFR Part 659, each state with a rail transit agency, like the Metro system, that receives FTA funding and is not under the jurisdiction of the Federal Railroad Administration must designate a state agency to carry out the SSO requirements. The TOC is a joint effort of staff from state government agencies from the District of Columbia, Virginia, and Maryland. State safety oversight agencies approve a transit agency's safety and security plans, review accident reports and corrective action plans, and conduct periodic safety audits, among other tasks. Unlike some transportation regulators like the FAA and the FRA, the TOC lacks the authority to levy fines or enforce civil penalties for noncompliance. In 2006, the Government Accountability Office conducted an assessment of the SSO program on a national level, including a case study on multi-state SSOs, including the TOC. The GAO report made note of administrative, financial, and organizational issues facing the TOC, to which we have responded by streamlining our organization, further empowering the TOC chair, and improving our working relationship with WMATA. In addition to the GAO report, the Federal Transit Administration audited the TOC program in 2007. The audit resulted in 8 findings of noncompliance and 4 findings of compliance with recommendations. Working with WMATA, TOC was able to close all but 2 findings of noncompliance and 1 finding of compliance with a recommendation. The TOC is in the process of preparing its next audit response submission to the FTA and expects to satisfy the 3 remaining audit findings in the near future. While the administration of the TOC program has improved, significant challenges remain. These include the lack of a traditional regulatory structure and continued funding constraints. The TOC has limited regulatory authority under 49 CFR Part 659. The only authority inherent to 659 is the ability of the SSO to recommend to the FTA to withhold 5% of grant funding if the Rail Transit Agency is non-compliant. Compliance with the SSO program is a requirement for FTA funding. However, SSO agencies themselves receive no FTA funds for program administration. Despite its limitations, state safety oversight programs nationwide have improved and expanded in the last few years. For example, the FTA now funds some training through the Transportation Safety Institute, as well as hosting workshops for SSO managers. Such courses have helped develop to improve the program overall and should be continued. The TOC is professionally and personally invested in the safety and security of the Metrorail system. Our members, as well as their friends and loved ones, are regular Metrorail riders. We hope our testimony can assist Congress with assessing and improving the SSO program and in turn improve rail transit safety nationally. With that, I conclude my statement and look forward to your questions.
I thank the gentleman. I now yield myself 5 minutes. we obviously have some votes pending, but what I'd like to do is to keep the hearing going so that we're not here at an unreasonably late hour. Mr. Graham, in trying to follow the budgetary priorities for the Washington Metro Area Transportation Authority, I know that the Administration and Oversight Committee just preliminarily approved a $177 million system infrastructure and rehab program. And trying to follow those items, it appears, and I may be wrong, so I'm not opposed to being corrected on this. It looks like the project includes new escalators, platform rehab, all very important things, track repairs, upgrades to the train power system, and most relevant here, the automatic train controls. But I could not find any allocation, and it's probably because of the significant cost, but I couldn't find any allocation relative to new train sets. In other words, retiring that 1000 series and bringing in 7,000 or whatever the next iteration of that train set might be. What are the plans, and does this the work that was done last night by the local regional delegation and Mr. Olver on the Transportation Appropriations Committee of $150 million, does that change the dynamic here, and what might we expect?
Mr. Chairman, it most definitely does change the dynamic. And we, as you know, we have an RFP which we have received bids on for replacement of the 1000 series cars, as well as the expansion of new cars, as well as new cars for the expansion to Dulles. And what we are awaiting is the dedicated funding. There's no question about it. If I may add, in terms of the $177 million red line rehab, that has been, it's gone through the committee, but it has not been approved by the board of directors. And in fact, our board is well aware of the fact that there may be additional demands that will take a higher priority than what has been set forth in that proposal.
Okay. I still have several minutes left. What I would like to do, and I'm going to have to take these answers on the record, I would like to ask each of you what you think the priorities for the next step. What has to happen next in terms of whatever you think the top priorities should be, whether it's in response to this accident or infrastructure needs, operational needs, the grant programs that Mr. Rogoff was talking about earlier. And I'm going to yield, and I'm going to allow the answers to go on the record, and I'm going to ask Ms. Eleanor Holmes Norton to take the chair and to continue with the process and use her allocation of time. But could we just use the next few minutes to go down the line and list what the priorities should be? Thank you. Mr. Cato.
Mr. Chair, since I'm next in order, yes, I will go. The first response and use of monies will be to respond to the recommendations of the National Transportation Board regarding this accident. That is the first commitment this agency will make in spending its dollars. And any future recommendations concerning our system, we need to have monies to respond to those. In order of magnitude, the next response would be the replacement of the 1000 series cars. They are very old. They need to be replaced, and as our chairman, Mr. Graham, has said, we've had the RFP and we're ready to go. All we need is just the funding to do that. Third, as I have mentioned many times, Metro has an urgent need of additional capital funds to maintain its infrastructure in a state of good repair, and that would be the third step. So first, safety from the requirements of this accident, any other safety needs, the replacement of the 1000 series cars, and continuous work on the aging infrastructure of the system.
First, then
I could, either way.
let me let the others go first.
Sorry, I turned it off. As far as priorities for our role in the FTA, I mean, I think our highest priority right now is to get a reform plan developed under Deputy Secretary Porcari and get that plan to Congress. We have a number of concerns as we look at the statutory authorities before us and the inspection resources that Mr. Madison and the other SSOs do not have, and the authorities that we do not have within the FTA to mandate adequate resources. And that is what we're doing as it relates to developing reform plans. As it relates to specifically the needs of WMATA, I think the most important thing is that we not prejudge the outcome of the investigation, that we keep our mind open in terms of what is the highest and most important capital need for those matching dollars that at least as an interim step seem to be coming forward from Congress. Because, you know, rail cars, while important, are really our last line of defense in an accident. The most important thing we always must be focused on is avoiding the accident and the collision entirely, as Mr. Cato has been very articulate about. You're not going to develop a rail car that's going to leave passengers harmless if they're colliding at 59 miles an hour. So we really need to be focused on capital investments that avoid that incident and similar incidents, and develop a capital plan around those safety assessments. Thanks.
Mr. Madison.
Our first priority is to continue working with WMATA and the NTSB on the investigation and to implement the recommendations that come out of the final report. Our next priority would be to work on improved legislation for the SSOs that give us greater authority, more power to actually make some serious recommendations and to have those rules be taken seriously. And I guess our last priority is increased funding that would also help with continued training for SSOs and also for staffing.
Ms. Hersman, did you have a list of priorities?
I would say the NTSB's first priority is get to the bottom of what's happened in this accident investigation, and then we can make appropriate recommendations to WMATA and others who may need to be the recipients of those recommendations. We've already begun that, working with the others, issuing recommendations, an urgent recommendation yesterday. With respect to the priorities for WMATA, FTA, and others, it's very encouraging to hear their responses to the question about what their priorities are. I think we would say from the Safety Board, our priorities would be for them to implement the safety recommendations that we've issued in the past. And what I heard from many of the responses here was that was what they were going to be looking at doing. We have now 11 open recommendations to WMATA with the one we issued yesterday, and some of those are in an open status. 2 of them are in an unacceptable status. We were very pleased with the quick response that we received from FTA and WMATA yesterday when we issued our recommendation that they're beginning to work on it immediately. So I think going forward, we'd like to see implementation of our recommendations. Thank you.
Mr. Graham.
Chair, may I add something about the probable cause issue, because we're extraordinarily concerned about this, and we're very respectful of the NTSB's pronouncements and all of the work that they're doing, some of which is central, some of which is peripheral. But let me make some basic points here. On June 17th, this signal device, let me call it a device because it has various component parts, which has become the focus of suspicion about the probable cause of this accident. On June 17th, this device was replaced in the course of routine scheduled maintenance. There was no indication, to our knowledge, of any problem relating to the functioning of this device. On June 22nd, of course, we had this horrendous accident, and thereafter we went back. And what we did, and I believe NTSB was involved in this, we saw that a subsequent review of this device functioning, there was this fluttering, so that at one point it was signaling the presence of a train and at another point it wasn't, which was obviously a very substantial problem here. But what happened was we replaced the device. And this is a very important point, Madam Chair. We replaced the device. You'd think that that would remedy the issue, that with a new device there might be some technical or other problem with the old device that we would have solved the problem insofar as this particular situation. In fact, Madam Chair, the new device that was replaced continued the same fluttering as the former device. And so we're left, and I'm making this point, Madam Chair, very intentionally. The Metro Board and the Metro management has issued a statement on this. We're left with a very compelling mystery as to what is going on here, and we have to focus all of our energies in determining just what is wrong. And let me say there's another significance to this. And the other significance is that for those who are concerned about the slow movement of our trains and the fact that we're on manual operation, I think with this mystery outstanding, it's very important that we do just that until we figure out just what happened. This is a probable cause situation, we believe, where the answers and the solutions are not immediately apparent. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Graham. Indeed, that segues into one of my questions. Mr. Cato initially thought this was, I think to quote him, a freak occurrence with the flickering in the track circuit. You indicate, Mr. Graham, that the flickering continues. And I believe that you are now testing on a daily basis, and I must ask you: should this, or could this, was there any reason why more frequent testing was not done before?
And I can sit here today and look back and say, was the testing that we did on a monthly basis sufficient? You know, to go back in time and to make a conscious decision to look forward at the degree of testing, our testing for 30 years served us well. But something...
Is this a new device? New device of a kind you never used before?
No, this is not a new device of the kind we've never used before.
So you've been running this device all along, and despite tests and changes, you've never seen the flickering before?
I'm not aware of flickering as a result of this device. And when I say I'm not aware, I've not personally found that in any of the records of that occurring. The investigation is still underway, and I think we will continue to investigate, to review our records to determine if that's the case. But the question has been, we've changed our processes, but in the urgent recommendations from the NTSB yesterday, they thought that was a good first step, but we're required to do more. And as a result of that, we are going to be doing more.
And I repeat, this hearing is not about assigning cause. We don't have the slightest idea. Nobody could possibly do it. This hearing is being held because the public needs to know what you know now.
Right.
And we are very pleased that as the information develops that you have developed thus far, you are making that information public and transparent. Mr. Cato, I'd like to ask about the recent decision to put the 1000 series trains in the middle with presumably more crash-worthy trains at either end. First, did the union recommend that, as I believe the union has indicated? Has it been done elsewhere?
Well,
when you're stuck with 30% of your fleet this way?
Let me answer the second part first, because that's the easiest. I'm not aware of it being done elsewhere. The cars are specifically placed based upon some decisions of crash worthiness.
Did it occur to no one at WMATA, given the fact that you were stuck with these trains because Congress had not come forward with money, there was no other way to raise it, that perhaps that would have been the better thing to do? And Ms. Hersman, did you ever recommend that?
Now, WMATA and myself, we were focused on making sure the crashes did not take place. As mentioned before, at 59 miles per hour, you might have vehicles that will not so-called telescope as much, but you're going to have severe damage. Our focus was keeping the system safe and to prevent accidents.
Well,
occurring.
Ms. Hersman, you're the expert, or at least the Transportation Board is national expert. You know these people could not replace those cars, and you have done your duty over and over again and said replace those cars. That message needed to come here, and of course it wasn't heard in time. Why did you not recommend? Well, it looks like a common sense a recommendation that doesn't require a bunch of experts. Hey, at least don't make the crash occur in the front end or the back end, and that's where crashes are first felt. Take these 1000 series cars and don't line them all up like sitting ducks the way they were on June 22nd. Why did you not recommend that?
Ms. Norton, we recommended after the Shady Grove accident in '96 that Metro look at all of their fleet and in consultation with some engineering experts to determine what needed to be done to improve the crashworthiness of their entire fleet, whether it was retrofitting, making those cars more robust.
But that's not my question, Ms. Hersman. These people are not the crash experts. And my question is very specific. Did it occur to anybody at NTSB? What I must tell you was the first thing to occur to Know Nothing Me. And I suspect to many people in the region, because I was on WashingtonPost.com and for an hour right after the accident, and somebody, wrote in, well, why didn't they just put one of the better cars at each end? I said, you have read my mind. I'll make sure I ask that question of Mr. Cato and the experts. My question is very simple. You knew these people could not possibly replace the trains. Over and over again, you said, do the impossible. Absent any way for them to possibly replace 30% of their fleet, didn't recommend that they take them out of service. Why did the Transportation Board not at least recommend this rather shall I call it low-tech, low-cost step was there a technical reason why? Is it just so in your face that even the experts didn't see it?
Well, I think the challenge here is because there are no standards and there is not crash testing done, that we don't have the engineering data to necessarily
support
the placement.
Well, in that case, should they not do this or not, Ms. Hersman? We don't know anything, according to the prior testimony, about crash-worthy standards, thanks to the federal government and Mr. Rogoff's agency, pardon me, before you came, but particularly because we have disallowed you. So I'm asking, is what they did the right thing to do, or now, in hindsight, would you say, well, that doesn't make a lot of difference?
I think the Safety Board has not taken a position on whether or not putting the cars in the center was the right thing to do. We did ask them to look at the evaluation of these cars in a scientific way.
I must tell you, Ms. Hersman, the reason I find that action that falls short, even if we give Mr. Rogoff the kind of perhaps authority he ought to have, I can tell you without fear of contradiction. Leave aside the recession we're in. Let's suppose we're in that false boom economy we've just come out where we made money. I can guarantee you that there is no transit system in the United States that isn't operating with old cars and cannot replace them quickly. Therefore, in this hearing, we're really looking for answers. And it's real easy to say,